Hello, I'm Karen and welcome to part 4 where we're making our converse style slippers, and for this part we're going to be doing the stitching around the edges. So we're going to need a tape measure for this because we need approximately 80 inches of yarn. That's going to give us enough yarn, so that's my 60. That's enough yarn to do all the stitching around the edges, but also to give us enough yarn left over to be able to do in our sewing in bits. Okay, so hopefully that's going to make life a little bit easier for there. Where's my needle? Obviously we've got to thread this on the needle for sewing, and this is the video where I'm going to be able to tell you all about the granny square and what I've discovered about crochet. Somehow that doesn't look long enough. It best be long enough, otherwise I'm going to look a fool on this video and I'll have to start all over again. But anyway, what we're going to do is, what I like to do is I like to work this way around. I don't know why, but I'm working a back stitch. So what you do is you go under one stitch, skip stitch and come out the other side, taking care not to snag any of your yarn while you're actually working around the actual slipper itself. I'm just going to put this piece, I put this piece out of the way. This is the actual piece I'm working with, so I'm ignoring that piece and I'm going to go in one side and out of the other. And that's all a back stitch is, if you don't know how to do a back stitch. Yes, it is time consuming, but this stiffens up the slipper and it also gives it a beautiful finish, in my opinion. So that's all I'm going to be doing all the way around. Now I've got to see if I can get all this history thing in. I've tried to brief it up as much as possible, so I'll quickly tell you. Originally I wanted to write a story, and I'm still going to write that story, which is a story involving the area where I live. And I actually live in a place called Bulwell. It's Bulwell, and that's in Nottingham. Okay, so when I was doing my history research, I've done all the stuff to do with the knitting and how people used to use framework knitting machines and when did they begin and everything else. And I was always curious about the crochet. Now I can trace knitting back a long way, and as many of you may know, that in Nottingham there was a man who made the knitting machine, and that was used to make socks, and progressed into making the lace working machines. Now lace work is actually it's very similar to crochet if you do it on a hook, and just using finer threads. So anyway, while I was doing my research, I was reading historical stuff, and I found this the memoirs written by this elderly gentleman, and he wrote it in the 1940s, so, and he was already in his 80s, so that meant that he was actually born in 1860. But he spoke about his parents and his grandparents, which was in Victorian times, which is where I wanted to go. And I actually found somebody else who, in his memoirs, he said when he stayed in Bulwell, the beds were adorned with these exquisite blankets that looked like stained glass windows. And I'm like, oh, stained glass windows, that's the granny square. And I also read, I think it was on a forum actually, that a lady said that she discovered where the granny square pattern, at the very beginning of it. And there is a book, I actually bought a copy of the book, written by a man called Walter Weldon, and it's this book is it's a publication of all, because he actually used to write pamphlets and publish them via London, and then they used to be sent to America and to France, which is why some people believe that crochet began in America, some people believe it began in France because of the books, but that's not actually true, because Walter Weldon was essentially a bit of a traveller. He was a very rich man. His brother lived down the road in Basford and owned a factory where they made socks and had all the machinery there. So I know that he would have come and spent time actually in Bulwell, and probably stayed here for a while, especially after reading about his son, who was called Raphael. And I'm just going to let you know, in this bit we're working in these stitches that the holes that we made when we slip stitched the toe together. But anyway, his brother Raphael, I think that's how you pronounce it, he lived in Basford. And no, that's not right. It was his son Raphael, wasn't it? His son was Raphael. And he actually turned out to be a scientist in the end. And when you read about Walter Weldon's son, you discover that his son wasn't actually allowed to read and write until he was actually 13 years old, which is when they moved to London. Now, I've got records of them living in Bulwell, and his brother and everything else. And because I know that he was publishing these pamphlets, which was about knitting, about sewing, and introduced crochet. So, and I thought, well, where did he get the pattern from though? Because he didn't write it himself. I think because he didn't let his children learn to read and write. I think what they was doing was going round to all the families in our village, which, well, it was a village at the time, it's not, it's classed as a town now, and to all the other ones around and collecting everybody's patterns. But I did notice as well that when I actually moved to Bulwell, that there was you see so many crochet blankets in winter when on the buggies for the babies and things. They're beautiful. And so I carried on doing some more of my research, and I actually discovered that there was actually a person who won a competition in Ireland in 1743. And those competitions, they still go to this day, and there's the different categories, which includes the crochet. So I was like, okay then, so now I can trace crochet all the way back to Ireland. So how did it get to my village in Bulwell in Nottingham? And I do believe the answer, which I found by accident because I was actually looking for my own relatives, because I was searching for the surname from my father's side, and because his name's Hutton. And so when I found, I found who our family relatives were and everything else, and I found this other lady who also had the surname of Hutton, and she was born in Ireland, and her name was Bridget. And I think that Bridget came over from Ireland and had learned how to crochet and made the granny blankets, because Bridget actually as well was the owner of a bed and breakfast. So she made the blankets that were on the beds that looked like the stained glass windows that the gentleman who came to stay in Bulwell slept in the bed with one of those blankets on. And Walter Weldon and his family also stayed in the same bed and breakfast, and while they was there Bridget would have taught Walter's wife, who was called Anne, how to do the granny square blankets while they was doing the ladies' things, because in those days it used to be the ladies and gentlemen used to do things separately sometimes. And so I believe that Bridget Hutton is the person that brought crochet to Nottingham in the early 1800s when she came over to live here with her family. And I also know that my own relatives actually lived in Bulwell, because my great grandparents lived here, and I think that they may well have also learned from this Bridget how to crochet the granny square. I'm just cutting this bit off and rethreading my needle so I can sew this bit in. I've got a bit too much left. And so I think it quite possibly is in my genes, because my great grandparents were framework knitters, and I had relatives that were weavers, and I say there's lots of framework knitters in my family, and they would have had the leftovers, which is described in Walter Weldon's book, because I've actually crocheted up the granny squares from his pattern using the colours that he said to use, which creates a stained glass window effect granny square. So there you have it. I believe that crochet began in Ireland, because it's the only historical reference that I can find that seems to match up with all the stories of things that go along. I left that one a little bit short, didn't I? Didn't help myself there. So what I'm going to do in one of my new videos is I'm actually going to share with you the very original granny square pattern from the I think it's got to be about, I know it's 1800 and something is the date of the original book, but I haven't got the original. See, it was originally done as pamphlets, and then it was reproduced into a book, which actually was done in America, or with an American lady, because she's actually got the stitches of what people use in America as a reference in there, but it's still actually written in English crochet. Now, I prefer to use the terms of the Americans, because to me it makes better sense, so I'm going to stick with that, but I'm going to share that with you, so hopefully that's another video you'll come and join me for. Right, so there we go. We've got our stitching around the edge. It's still floppy, because it really is putting on the second sole, which stiffens this all up. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish this video, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make one more video, so it'll be part 5, where I'm actually going to make the sole and attach it to the bottom. And as long as I've got enough time, I'm going to tell you how to do the lace. This lace, I timed myself, it actually takes 10 minutes to make the laces, but which is bizarre, but all I've done is done a chain of 130 and then slip stitched back in that chain to be able to make the laces. Okay, so thank you for watching, thank you for liking, thank you for subscribing. I hope you like the little bit of history that I've given you so far, and when I do the granny squares and do it and show you, you'll be surprised actually. You really will. But it's so similar to what I was taught, but not quite. Okay, thanks again, bye for now.